When people speak about international affairs, national interest is a common term used in these conversations. We are going to see here what it is and why it is important. We are flying in. Hello and welcome to Backstage Politics. My name is Esteban Vidal and the purpose of this channel is to help you understand politics and international relations. Here you will be told what nobody else tells you about politics. Today I want to speak to you about national interest. Usually, statesmen refer to the national interest to justify certain measures in the foreign policy or the country's position on the international stage. However, this idea is vague for those who aren't familiar with this concept or for beginners in IR. So it's fundamental to have a clear notion about its meaning and the critical role it plays in international relations. In addition to this, it's essential to get the whole picture by explaining how it works and what determines it. First of all, what is the origin of this term? National interest meaning is related to the French concept raison d'etat. It means the reason of a state. Nevertheless, this concept has its roots in Italy during the Renaissance. At that time, as a result of the permanent quarrels between Italian cities, emerged the new idea of the state, lo Stato in Italian. It referred to the condition or circumstances of the polity, and it included the political institutions, but also the public matters. That's its meaning in the modern sense, although its existence dates back to the Middle Age. Anyways, when we speak about the national interest, we refer to the interest of the state, namely the political community. In this regard, Machiavelli contributed to developing this idea that Francesco Guicciardini had already used before. So it's an interest that it's above any individual's interest because it includes the whole community considered in political terms. And for protecting this interest, anything is allowed because it's an objective interest, more important than any individual's interest. Guicciardini himself didn't hesitate to claim the need to do bad things if the national interest requires it. He said, "When I talk of murdering or keeping the peasants in prison, I didn't perhaps talk as a Christian. I talked according to the reason and practices of states." This quotation is enlightening insofar as it tells us the way the national interest works and its importance in political terms. Then, the national interest works as a driving force for any state because its existence depends on it. Hence, the state has to protect that interest as much as possible to survive. We see this principle is fundamental for the national conduct, and it's the state's first law of motion. It tells what to do to preserve the health and strength of the state. All of this is valid in the domestic realm, but also in the external domain. The state looks for its survival, and by doing so, it tries to preserve its interest in domestic and international affairs. In this way, we notice how important the concept of national interest is because it has to do with the existence of the polity. That explains its dominant role in politics, both domestic and foreign. It shapes and drives the state behavior with its citizens and with other countries. We've seen what the national interest is and why it's important. Now it's time to take one more step and address how it works and what shapes it. At this point, consider subscribing and clicking the bell to stay tuned. Let's move on. The balance between the state and society has a direct relation with the national interest. That's because every state needs the obedience of its citizens to survive. So the national interest has to do with the means the state has to make society comply with its rules. I refer both to coercion and legitimacy. The state's survival depends on its capacity to apply violence to society and to force it to obey. I'm talking about security issues and everything related to its political structures and institutions to enforce the law. And I also refer to those means to create public consent and the necessary cooperation of society with the state. These fields that include different institutions and procedures are critical, and they have a decisive impact on national interest. As a result, the well-being of these structures determines the state's behavior. By protecting and expanding these means, the state ensures its existence. In the external realm, the situation is different because the state has to deal with actors different than society. and also because it's a specific field in which other rules govern it. In this respect, the state conducts its foreign relations in accordance with its position on the international stage and the environment in which it operates. Interactions with other states depend on many different factors. For instance, how good these relations with neighbors are. The atmosphere in the surroundings has an influence too. But what is crucial in political terms is the nature of the international sphere and the power relations in this realm. So, the international realm is anarchical. Hostility, fear, and competition prevail in this domain. Every state distrusts each other, and insofar as possible, they look for ensuring their security. That means two things: survival and independence. Hence, these two elements determine the national interest in international relations. However, they depend on the distribution of power in this domain. It entails national capacities and the resulting international power structure that shapes the global hierarchy. Every state looks for strengthening its position on the world's chessboard, but they depend on their inner conditions. That is related to geopolitical factors insofar as states are territorial polities. Therefore, we have to talk about the influence of geopolitics on the definition of the national interest. In this respect, we find several variables such as the extension of the territory, the shape of borders, the location, the population, but also the distances, and so on. They all contribute to defining the national interest because it has a territorial base. Besides, these factors have a direct impact on national power, which is also related to the configuration of the national interest in the international sphere. The geographical location of the state affects its international position regarding its neighbors, and especially the distribution of power and territory. We can't forget the fact that land is a source of political, economic, and military power, and that is decisive in the definition of the national interest. The resources available in a state determine its capacities, and therefore its power. As a result, the state occupies a position in the global power structure, and it also defines its national interest. Naturally, these factors have to do with the tactical realm. If we had to summarize the content of the national interest of every state, regardless of its geopolitical background, we would have to say survival. Every state wants to survive, and to do so they struggle for power. That's the strategic goal of all states. The international competition, with its permanent hostilities, drives this dynamic in which power plays a critical role. And power, as we've seen, depends on those factors that determine the national capacities and, in brief, the national power. Although geographical factors have a remarkable influence on the shape of national interest, we can't dismiss the importance of territory organization. Not only the population, raw materials, and other resources constitute the source of national power. We have to mention how the state organizes the space, and the methods of government it uses to mobilize those resources available. All of these factors have an impact on the definition of national interest and how the state behaves in the international sphere. You may wonder if someone intervenes in the definition of the national interest. The fact is that these geopolitical conditions don't work by themselves automatically. Human mediation is necessary. However, it would deserve a whole episode to discuss who defines national interest and makes important decisions in this field. So don't forget to subscribe and you don't miss anything. Question of the day. Do you think the national interest should have any restriction to counterweight the state's autonomy? Post your opinion in the comment section below and I'll check it out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe by clicking here. Share and smash the like button. I also recommend you watch this video about the relation between the domestic and international realms. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you the next time.